I think it's worse than a political act to announce the leaving. It's a kind of an act of personal narcissism. When this was talked about a few months ago in the press, there was a mention of the fact that if the full withdrawal happened in 2016, that would allow Obama to leave office having fulfilled the promise to liquidate the wars. I mean, is that how we're now setting the strategy of the United States of America in a war zone where so many have died and so much treasure and blood has been spent, so that a president can leave office looking good?
Well, Charles Krauthammer claiming the president's putting his legacy ahead of our troops. President Obama wants the U.S. to leave Afghanistan with fewer than 10,000 troops by the end of this year, 2014, handing over full control to Afghan security forces to patrol their country. Virtually all U.S. troops would be out by the end of 2016. Pete Hegseth, CEO of Concerned Veterans for America. Pete, good morning to you from Minneapolis today. What did you think of the first react to Charles Krauthammer there? What do you think of that comment?
I think he's onto something. This president has been all about drawing withdrawal deadlines, setting deadlines, and ending these wars no matter what. And it's always seemed to have been around election years, 2008, 2012, 2016. In 2008, it was denying the success of the surge, which was clearly having an impact. In 2012, it was all about getting out of Iraq as quickly as possible and not signing a status of forces agreement. And today we see civil war and al-Qaeda's flag flying over Fallujah. And in 2016, we're hearing a president now that as he's announced, is going to say we're down to 0 troops in 2016 in Afghanistan, so that he can say his legacy is of ending these wars, that we've turned the page. The problem, Bill, is that our enemies have not turned the page. And so if we don't leave behind good conditions, we could find ourselves fighting in these very same places, unfortunately, yet again.
All right, that was Krauthammer from last night. This is John Kerry on the Today Show from earlier this morning.
Unless you set a date, they won't assume responsibility. It's almost basic human nature. Do you get your homework done if there isn't a deadline for it? Generally, a lot of people don't. The fact is that if you tell the Afghans, we're going to be here just as long as it takes, take your time, believe me, they'll take all the time in the world.
Well, what he's saying is you give them a mile, they'll take a mile. You give them 5 miles, they'll take 5 miles, and you have to set up boundaries.
Well, he's right in a sense.
Common sense. What do you think of what Secretary Kerry's making there?
Well, he's right in a sense. If you've worked with Iraqis or Afghans, you understand if you give them a mile, they will take that mile. You've got to have tight parameters. At the same time, optically, I think what he's dismissing too quickly is that when you declare that you're going to leave, calculations changed amongst the minds of the people you're working with and the enemy you're fighting. They see right through you to a future that does not include you. So their calculations are based on, well, how am I going to A, survive, or what allegiances do I have to create now so that I keep myself safe or keep the job that I have when the Americans are gone. The optics of commitment are very, very important, and that's the problem of what the president is doing at the very top. Rather than saying we'll do what's necessary with an enduring commitment to preserve Afghanistan, we'd like to draw down as much as we can, but we're committed. Instead, we're saying turning the page. All it sends to our enemies and allies is that, we won't be here, and it's time for them to pursue their own ends regardless of our influence.
When we see the president at West Point and the cadets are gathering now for their graduation ceremony today, and it'll be a remarkable sight, as it is every year, Pete, as you well know. There will be talk about Afghanistan, the future for the United States all over the world, in the Middle East, et cetera, but especially Syria. I mean, there is now consideration being given that the president may approve this idea to train and equip moderate fighters inside that country. Now, this has been debated for more than a year. Is this something that you would support?
Well, it is something I would support done correctly. Problem is it's 5 days late and $5 short. This is something 3.5 years ago that could have had a lot of impact in deposing Assad. Instead, we've been sending non-lethal aid and setting red lines that we have abdicated and ignored. And in the process, the situation has only gotten worse. You've got an outright civil war with more radical Islamists on the ground trying to fight the Assad regime. So you have an impossible choice. And now you have to vet those rebels, determine which are less radical, and try to assist them while they're already on the heels their heels because Assad has been able to push them back. So I welcome the fact that he's taking some sort of a serious approach here and acknowledging that just sending them food and non-lethal aid isn't enough. The question is, can we turn the tide? And does Assad believe that we would be committed to seeing this through? Because if he just sees this as an incremental small step, it doesn't change his calculation. And there's nothing in this president's rhetoric that sounds or seems like strength, which is important.
You look at so many regions of the world and you see the rise of Islamic extremism, and we can see that clearly, whether it's inside Syria, whether it's, as you mentioned, Fallujah and Anbar province in Iraq, or what's to come of the continent of Africa. Pete, thank you for your time. We're waiting on this. There will be major headlines, and we will bring them to our viewers then. Thank you, Pete, from Minneapolis today.